I'm in the early stages of building my first ADU, and let me tell you, there's a lot more to it than I expected. So if you're thinking about building an ADU yourself, I'm sharing everything that I've learned so far so you can be better prepared from day one. Let's get into it. So what is the point of building an ADU? Why even consider doing this? I see an ADU as a smart financial move. I already own land, so why not put it to work? It's an investment, right? So whether I rent it out long-term or short-term or just increase my home's value, it's a win-win. The great thing is that if I own an ADU, that means that I can use it for multiple different reasons. And I'm always talking about how to generate wealth using your home's equity. And this is one of the best possible ways to do it in 2025 and moving forward. And also you have the aspect of multi-generational living. So at some point, my mom is going to need a place to stay, so she's going to come out here and live with us. And this gives us flexibility and extra living space too, right? It could be a guest house, a home office, or just a separate space for family to use when they're in town. It's useful in so many different ways. I'm really fortunate right now because my sister-in-law is currently in the ADU process, right? So she already has the foundation laid and she has the structure that has been delivered. I was just in it yesterday and it was really awesome, right? And this means that I get to see firsthand the process that she's going through so I can model what she's actually doing. But before I start, there are some very important things that need to be checked out first. The biggest mistake that most people make is thinking you can just build whatever you want. First, you have to check what the zoning laws are in your city, in your township, in your specific area. Before you even think about designing an ADU, you have to make sure the property is legally allowed to have one. So every city, every township, every borough, every county has its own zoning laws, and they determine whether ADUs are allowed at all, how big your ADU can be, where on your lot it can actually go, and how many ADUs can you actually have. And here's a pro tip for you. Call your local planning department or check your city's website before you spend a penny on plans or contacting contractors. So let's start with the first big question. Does your property actually allow an ADU? Most single-family residential lots that are zoned R1 now allow ADUs, but some areas still have restrictions. Some cities allow ADUs only on lots that meet a minimum size requirement, while others have rules based on your property's zoning code. So if your home is in an HOA, right, a homeowners association, they're going to have their own restrictions. And even if your city allows ADUs, there is a great chance that you cannot build anything because you're in an HOA. Then you have to look at your setbacks and lot size. Even if your property allows an ADU, you have to make sure you have enough space to meet local setback requirements. So Shawn, what are setbacks? A setback is the required minimum distance between a structure and the property line, road, or another designated area as regulated by local zoning law. So setbacks help control building placement to properly ensure spacing, safety, and aesthetics within a community. And these rules, they're going to vary city by city, and they're going to significantly impact how big your ADU can actually be. Here's what you need to know. Most cities require at least 4 feet from the back and the side property lines for detached ADUs. Some areas allow 0 setbacks for garage conversions since the structure is already in place, and that makes a lot of sense. For front yard setbacks, in most cases, ADUs are not even allowed in the front yard. But you'll get some cities that they allow some exceptions, especially for like the more unique lot layouts or flag lots, homes that are set back from the street. And then some cities require a minimum separation, example, somewhere between 6 and 10 feet between the main house and then the ADU. And others allow attached ADUs to be built right up against the existing home. And then you have to think to yourself, what about lot coverage rules? Some cities limit how much of your lot can be covered by buildings. So for example, if your city has a 40% coverage rule and your house already takes up 35%, that leaves you with 5% for your ADU. Another thing to consider is height restrictions. Many areas limit detached ADUs to 16 feet max, which is a single-story structure. And some cities allow two-story ADUs, but may require a larger setback. For example, 5 to 10 feet instead of only 4. And here's a pro tip for you. If your lot is small or oddly shaped, you are going to need a variance, which is a special approval to build an ADU. Now we get into the process which really drives so many people crazy, which is permitting. The permitting process is where a lot of people get stuck, and trust me, it's not something that you want to rush. So how long does it actually take? Depending on your city, getting permits for an ADU can be anywhere from 3 to 12 months or less. If your plans require revisions, it can add months to the timeline. And I want to break down the steps for you to make it all make sense. So step 1 is the pre-approval, is the zoning check and feasibility study. Some cities offer free consultations where they review your property and tell you what's allowed. And this is where you confirm the setbacks, the size limits, and the parking rules. Step 2 is the architectural plans and engineering. You're going to need a detailed architectural drawing of your ADU before submitting for permits. So in some areas, a structural engineer must approve the plans. Step 3 is the permit application submission process. So you're going to submit plans to your city's building department for approval. So common permits required are building permits for the actual structure, the electrical permit for the wiring and the outlets, plumbing permit for water and sewer, and mechanical permit for heating and cooling. And I know you're probably saying to yourself, this is a lot. This is what I'm finding out as well. Step 4 is the plan review and revisions. So the city may review your plans and ask for additional changes. If changes are required, you're going to go back to the architect, make the revisions, and then you're going to have to resubmit, which leads into step 5, which is the permit approval and the fees. Now, once you're approved, you're going to have to pay the permit fees. Can range anywhere from a few $100s to a few thousand and upwards of $20,000, depending on your locations. Step 6 is the inspection during the construction. So once construction starts, your ADU must pass multiple city inspections for the foundation, for framing, for electrical, for plumbing, and the final occupancy approval. And here's a pro tip. Hiring an ADU-specific architect or contractor can speed up the process because they know exactly what the city requires and can avoid all the costs and mistakes. But do you know what one of the biggest surprises is for homeowners? The cost of connecting utilities to your ADU. Here's what you need to know, and here's what I have been finding out. Your ADU is most likely going to need a separate utility meter. So here's another pro tip. Call your local planning department before doing anything, and they're going to tell you exactly what's needed and exactly what is allowed. If you have been thinking about building an ADU, drop a comment below with your big questions, and I'll make sure that I find the right answers for you. Here's another question that I know you're asking yourself. How much does it actually cost to build an ADU? More than you think, but there are ways to make it work for a very affordable price. So first off, you have a garage conversion. A garage conversion is exactly that. You have an existing garage and you convert it to a living space. So it can be $25,000 up to $50,000, maybe even $75,000 or more. It all depends on the level of conversion that you want to do. Next, you have a detached new build. So a detached new build, depending on where you're located in the US, can be anywhere from $50,000 all the way up to $300,000. And then you have a luxury or custom ADU, and these can be $300,000 or more. Again, this all depends on the level of construction and the level of amenities and everything that you want in the ADU. But here's the really cool thing about building ADUs, and you can get really, really creative like my sister-in-law is doing, and you can do it for a very affordable price. At the end of her build, she's looking to be under $50,000 for a detached property. So essentially, she's converting a shed into an ADU and doing most of the work herself to keep the cost down. So if you are looking to do it for a more affordable price, this is the way to go about it. So now that you have an idea of what it's going to cost, how are you actually going to pay for it? The first way to do it is a cash out refinance. So you can tap into your home's equity utilizing a HELOC, which is a home equity line of credit. So borrow only what you need and then add about 10% just in case. I think a home equity line of credit is one of the best ways that you can utilize your home's equity to build wealth. The second way to do it is a construction loan, and these are good if you don't have the cash up front. So essentially, you'll have to go to a local bank and ask them for a construction loan. You'll have to go through the approval process, just like you would for a home equity line of credit too. And then the bank will determine your financial position and how much money they're actually willing to lend. The third option is actually to use cash. And this is what a lot of people do. There's a good amount of homeowners out there who have been saving up and they want to put their cash to work instead of just sitting in a checking account collecting no money at all. So this is a good way to utilize the cash that you have been saving. And then lastly, there are ADU grants and incentives. So some cities actually offer financial help. But even if you have the financing, here is a big mistake that you do not want to make. Bigger isn't always better, especially when it comes to ADUs. The right size depends on what you're using it for, how much you want to spend, and whether your local zoning laws put any limits on it. The key is to finding the sweet spot between functionality and cost so you're not overbuilding or overshooting your needs. So do you want a studio, a 1-bedroom, or a 2-bedroom? Studios are the most affordable and make great guest suites, home offices, or short-term rentals. If the space is well designed, they can feel surprisingly roomy. But keep in mind that you're going to have zero privacy, and that means it's not ideal for long-term tenants who want separation between their beds and the rest of their life. Then you have a 1-bedroom, which is really the sweet spot for long-term rentals and multi-generational living. You're going to get a dedicated bedroom, which makes it way more livable without jacking up the cost too much. And it's perfect for single professionals, retirees, or small families who want independent spaces but don't need a ton of square footage. And then you have the 2 bedrooms, which gives you the most flexibility, but also comes with the highest possible cost. So think more plumbing, you're going to need a bigger foundation, and higher permitting fees. If your market can support a higher rent, or you're planning to house aging parents or adult kids, it could be worth it, but again, it's going to cost much more. So otherwise, you might be overbuilding for what you actually need. So how do you go about maximizing space in an ADU? An open floor plan makes a small ADU feel much bigger. So fewer walls equals more flexibility. So combine that with big windows and light colors, and suddenly your tiny ADU doesn't feel tiny at all. And then you have multifunctional furniture, which is a game changer. Murphy beds, expandable tables, and built-in seating with storage lets you get the most out of every square foot. If it can do more than one thing, it's definitely worth considering. And touching a little bit more about built-in storage, this is going to keep clutter under control, which is always a big issue in a smaller property. Wall-mounted shelves, custom cabinets, and even under-stair storage, if you have a loft, can make a small space feel organized instead of cramped. And speaking of cost, here is something a lot of people forget to budget for. Most people set a budget for their ADU, but hidden costs sneak up really fast. And if you don't plan for them, you could be looking at thousands of dollars in unexpected expenses. Here's what you need to watch out for. First off, you have site prep and utility hookups. If your lot is not flat, you might need to grade it or build retaining walls, which adds to your cost before the construction of the actual property even starts. And if the soil isn't stable, you're looking at even more prep work. Next, you have utility hookups, and they can get really expensive, especially if your ADU is far from the main house. So running new plumbing, electrical, or sewer lines could add tens of thousands of dollars to your budget, so always check before committing to a spot in the backyard. And next, you have permit and impact fees, and this is what no one thinks about. Permits are not just a small cost. Think again. For permitting, some cities charge just a few $100, but in others, especially in like Los Angeles area, it could be $10,000 or more in permits and impact fees. So before you even break ground, These fees could cover things like the plan reviews and the inspections, but they vary widely by location. Impact fees are another huge surprise expense. Some cities waive them for ADUs, while others charge thousands. So if you don't check with this up front, it's going to throw off your whole budget. And here is the killer. Choosing the wrong contractor. The wrong contractor can turn any project into a money pit with delays, and I know this firsthand. A cheap bid is usually cheap for a reason. The goal isn't just a good price, it's a good price with zero nightmares. And speaking of choosing the right contractor, how do you actually go about doing that? If you pick the wrong contractor for your project, for any project, especially your ADU, the experience can go from exciting to literally disastrous real quick. So here's how to make sure you get someone who knows what they are doing. If they're not licensed and insured, you walk away immediately. I don't care how great their work looks. No license, no recourse if they screw something up. No insurance, you are on the hook if a worker gets hurt on your property. Always verify that they're licensed with the state's licensing board. Just because someone says they're licensed doesn't actually mean that they are. Next, you want to get multiple bids. Compare at least 3 to 5 quotes. Never go with the first bid. Prices vary a lot, and the cheapest one isn't always the best. If someone's way cheaper than the rest, the chances are they'll cut corners or hit you with hidden costs later. Make sure you look for detailed estimates, which include labor, materials, and timeline. And if they're vague, that's a huge red flag. Next, you have to ask for referrals. Look at past projects and talk to homeowners that they have actually worked with. If they've done great work before, the past clients will vouch for them. Ask for at least 3 referrals and actually call them. Ask the homeowners if the contractor stayed on budget, if they met the deadlines that they set, if they communicated well, because communication is so important. You're going to learn a lot just by listening to their experiences. Next, you want to check the timeline. A great contractor might be booked out months in advance. If someone says they can start tomorrow, be careful. The best contractors are in demand, and typically they're booked out several months. That doesn't mean you should wait years, but be realistic about the scheduling. And if you're in a rush, discuss phase construction or timeline flexibility up front. All right, and I know you've been thinking about this, so let's talk about money, because an ADU isn't just about extra space. It's one of the best wealth building moves that you can make as a homeowner. Let's look at long-term rental income. So a 1-bedroom ADU can rent anywhere from $1,000 to maybe $1,500. In some areas, you can get upwards of $2,000 or even $2,500 a month. And that's a steady stream of passive income that can help you cover parts of your mortgage and your property expenses. And the best part, even in a down market, ADUs will stay in demand because they offer a more affordable housing option. They're going to be perfect for young professionals, for retirees, and for smaller families who want their own space without renting a full big house. Next, we're going to look at the short-term rentals, so putting it on Airbnb or Vrbo. So it's higher cash flow, but it's more work, and let me tell you, I know all about that. If you are in the right area, Airbnb and Vrbo can bring in anywhere from $50 to $100, $150, or even $200 per night, meaning you can make more in a week than a tenant would pay you in a month, but that doesn't always happen, and don't rely solely on that. Because here's the catch. Short-term rentals require a lot of work. You're managing bookings, you're dealing with cleanings, and you're dealing with the guests if they have any issues. And if you don't want the hassle, a property manager can handle it, but that'll cost you, and that's going to cut into your profits. And here's one of my absolute favorite things about the potential of building an ADU. It's going to increase the property value because homes with ADUs will sell for more. A home with a legal ADU is going to be way more attractive to buyers because it's a built-in income stream. Whether they rent it out or use it for family, it's going to add massive value. In some markets, adding an ADU can increase your home's value by 20 or 30%. That's a huge return for when you do decide to sell your home. Building an ADU is one of the smartest ways to create wealth, but it's just one piece of the puzzle. If you want to learn more about ways to leverage your home's equity, check out this video that I made that's all about unlocking generational wealth using your home's equity.